Hello, I'm Deborah Rees and welcome to the second of my two presentations on executive pay. This one is about the future of executive reward. In this presentation, I'm going to talk about the present, the past and the future of executive remuneration. Let's kick off with thinking about the present. At Inecto, we think there are key three influences on executive pay today. These are regulation, stakeholder requirements, and demographic pressures. Firstly, regulation. Increased regulation following the financial crisis has now trickled down into all elements of business. Remuneration committees have more responsibility than before. They're required not just to think about the pay for the executive team, but also to consider the risk implicit in incentives and bonus schemes across the organisation. We've also seen the introduction of binding shareholder votes, which require increased transparency as organisations seek to engage their stakeholders within their remuneration arrangements. Increased regulation can come from the UK, from the Business Innovation and Skills Department, but we've also seen the EU starting to take some influence. They've taken a level of overarching regulation around bonus payments, suggesting that they should be capped at up to 100% of salary, which will be a seismic change for the banking industry. Stakeholders such as pension funds are becoming far more active as owners of the business, where previously they were uninvolved or neutral, although it has to be said that last year's shareholder spring has not materialised as much difference as was anticipated. And finally, we're seeing changing demographics in the workforce as baby boomers start to leave and retire. To give us more insight, let's go back and think about the past. What used to work in business now doesn't, where being very large, doing things very consistently, having a routine, a hierarchy and cultural homogeny were important. We're now seeing that organisations need to be more nimble, have more open access, become more diverse. And in fact, technical skills are now a given, where many pieces of information can be looked up on the internet in seconds. What's key is an understanding of joining the dots and being able to add value to organisations through insights and seeking out trends. The demographic descriptors of the baby boomers, Generation X and Y, and their characteristics display the differences in expectations and reward. So baby boomers who are now aged 50 to 70 are leaving the workforce, and with them leave their traits of loyalty, working for a company for life, and deferred gratification, for example, waiting to achieve partner status after 15 years. Replacing them in the workforce is Generation Y, currently aged around 20 to 30. They have different expectations of life. They see themselves as global, tech-savvy citizens and CEOs of their own business and family. They hire their skills to the highest bidder and move on quickly when new skills and earning potential have been achieved. So how can organisations best harness these changes for the future and make the biggest difference? Before we go into that, let's just think for a moment about how the traditional views of what made organisations succeed have been upset. In Daniel Pink's book Drive, he asks us to consider the example of two World Wide Web encyclopedias which were started about the same time in the early 2000s. One of them had all of the resources of organisation behind it, unlimited experts, information and resources to use. The second was established on open code and basically asked individuals around the world to share their views where they were expert or where they had an opinion. Encarta, which was the Microsoft project, was closed in 2009, leaving Wikipedia, which is the open code and free result, has now gone from strength to strength, where individuals are encouraged to contribute their own knowledge and ideas. But we wouldn't have expected that. We would have expected in the old world that money and unlimited resources would have been what harnessed the biggest change. So in fact, what we can see are some trends for change here. In terms of other aspects of the regulation that will make a difference, by the Department of Business Innovation and Skills requiring organisations to disclose a single figure for their executive pay, we're able to use data analysis to produce a zone of fair pay, as Kepler Associates have done. They've introduced a significant change where they're able to track individuals' pay against the performance of their business and to identify those organisations that are either overpaying or underpaying their executives in comparison to the performance and shareholder return of the business. We are seeking to have a better understanding of pay. We're seeking to challenge what motivates individuals. And finally, we want to see how the increased regulation and shareholder voting will influence pay within organisations. The final significant trend has been a move towards more seriously long-term incentives, rather than the 3 to 5 years that we've seen over the last 10 years. We're seeing that organisations are increasingly aligning to longer-term stakeholder goals. In organisations like Unilever and HSBC, we've seen some significant changes in the way they want to remunerate people. Paul Polman, who is the chief exec of Unilever, has gone on record with what he calls the world's most audacious business plan, seeking to double the organisation's size whilst halving its environmental footprint over the next 20 years. He links this to executive remuneration, and although the Remuneration Committee has yet to release plans, it seems likely during 2013 that those plans for rewarding executives in line with this long-term sustainability plan will start to emerge. A second global giant who have introduced long-term plans is HSBC. This organisation has started to introduce whole shares, where individuals are awarded their shares on the basis of their achievements to date. They're expected to hold the shares for the whole of their career. I suppose our questions would lead us to think, how does this impact organisations where there are different requirements? They're less stable, less mature, and therefore organisations have to think more carefully about volatility and nimbleness. So where does this lead us to consider how pay works? At Inecto, we think about the pillars of reward. We talk about the 4 key pillars of reward, which together build to create an employee deal. These are base pay, variable pay, both short and long-term incentive schemes, recognition and benefits. A good question for your organisation is, what do each of these do as part of their employee deal? We often see that there's an overlap between performance awards in base pay and bonus schemes. Sometimes organisations are not particularly clear about why someone would receive an increase in base, but they wouldn't receive a bonus. So it's important to think about where your reward pillars work. Are there any areas that are stronger or weaker than others? The pillars should be underpinned by performance management, so that there are clear indications of what good and great performance looks like in your organisation. And as always, communication is absolutely key. If you're not able to communicate something, then essentially your employees won't understand it. So where do our conclusions lead us? An emphasis on simplicity, on long-term and regulation. But in reality, this is a conflict with innovation and being more nimble. There's a conflict between the needs of the Generation Y and the baby boomer generations. And so we can see that the future is not particularly clear, particularly for those organisations that are within the FTSE umbrella. The AIM regulations are much less detailed, and therefore smaller organisations who are listed on the AIM have the advantageous position of much greater flexibility around this. Thank you for viewing our presentations. Please get in touch if you'd like any further information or to join our mailing list.